Good afternoon and welcome to the 10th episode of the Catalyst for Change series. I'm John Jacobs, your moderator for this series, for this session. This is our final session, actually, of this series. I'm gonna miss covering these topics. We have a great topic for you today that I'll take you through in just a moment. I'll take us through also some bullet points, some data points, so that we have a common understanding of this conversation. We are taking questions. So if you have questions, if you navigate to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Feel free to populate questions there. And we'll turn to those questions after we have this roundtable discussion. So let me go ahead and share my screen and show you those bullet points, if I may. Just one sec. And I have to put it into show mode. Catalyst for Change, how companies turn disruption into success. This discussion today, the 9th, is entitled The Company We Keep, Building the Right Culture for Tomorrow. And here are those quick bullets, so feel free to read along as you wish. 20 million US workers have left their jobs, quit their jobs since April of 2020 of last year. That's from Forbes. 10 million job openings were available in October of this year. So that's quite a number. I think it's the second highest number I think it's over 50 years on a monthly basis. Next bullet, 85% of employees have said in a Gallup survey that they are either not engaged or actively disengaged at work. I'm very interested in the definition of actively disengaged, but that's what that was the outcome. 82% of US workers have said that organizational purpose is important to them and important to the organization, yet only about half of that number feel that it's actually being driving impact or results for their company. 39% of US workers surveyed said they have turned down jobs in the past due to a perceived lack of inclusion in the organization, that they might be included in the organization. 87% of executives state that their workforce are experiencing a significant skills gap. That was a McKinsey study from earlier this year, a global survey rather. And interestingly, the same percentage of millennials value in-house development and training as important to career advancement. So somewhat of a gap there from the two perspectives. And finally, no less than 54% of all employees will require significant training or reskilling or upskilling in the coming year. This is from World Economic Forum back in 2018. Great panel for you today, great discussion. We have Jamie Notter, co-founder of Propel. Propel is a company culture or corporate culture consultancy. Naveen Krishnamurthy is president and CEO of Riva Solutions in Virginia, and Alex Iams, executive vice president with Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. There, we have the actual folks here, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome our panel. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Good. Great to be here.
Great. I'm great. Thank you. I'm going to read briefly these abbreviated bios because I think it's important for the audience to know who we have before us. Jamie Notter. Jamie is, as I mentioned, co-founder of Propel. He's an author, consultant, and cultural strategist there, where he helps leaders integrate culture, strategy, and execution to achieve breakthrough performance and impact. His work includes designing culture-driven organizations and conflict resolution. Jamie is also co-author of 3 books and holds a master's in conflict resolution from George Mason University. Naveen Krishnamurthy is president and CEO of Riva Solutions, Inc. And Naveen has worked to define a culture that inspires employees to achieve unimaginable personal and professional development. Through social media, he shares real-time visions with his team and the community. Naveen speaks regularly in executive leadership panels and has earned industry accolades, most notably the prestigious Fed 100. Previously, Naveen has worked in Silicon Valley and with Booz Allen Hamilton and CACI International. Alex Iams. Alex is executive vice president, Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. He has been, over the past year rather, Alex has worked on the Fairfax County Economic Recovery Strategy and a cross-sector strategy to advance economic opportunities throughout the National Capital Region. His past work includes the recruitment of Amazon HQ2 to Virginia, and the development of land use and infrastructure plans for nearby areas. Previously, Alex held positions with the Council of Economic Finance Agencies and the International Economic Development Council. That is our panel. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Let me begin, if I had to begin somewhere. So Jamie, I'm going to torture you a little bit first and ask you sort of definitionally, what is company culture and why does it matter?
Yeah, so culture, oh, and by the way, I'm going to jump in on the actively disengaged thing. You know what it
good.
means?
Thank you.
It means people hate their job so much, they're intentionally making it worse. And it's about 1 in 7, according to Gallup. Yeah. So anyway, just let that sink in. You got people go rowing in the exact opposite direction. But anyway, so culture for me is ultimately about what's valued, right? Like the culture in an organization tells the employees, hey, we value this stuff, but not like core values, although you can have those too. It's like, you know, what is valued, what is rewarded, what gets our attention, because that's what drives behavior, right? And that's actually the why it matters piece. Like the whole culture eats strategy for breakfast phrase, that comes from the fact that your strategy is an idea about how you're going to get somewhere. Your culture tells people what's valued, and that drives their behavior. And so it's complex. It exists in the words you use to describe it. It also exists in the behaviors inside the organization. And obviously, if the behaviors and the words don't match, you've got a problem, and the behaviors win, by the way, on that one. And there's some deeper assumptions that go into it. And then there's tangible aspects of culture like dress code and you know, equipment you use and office design and those kind of things. So there's some complexity to it, but it all boils down to how do we tell people what is valued here? Because that'll drive their behavior. And the behavior is what's going to drive results. And that's why it's so important.
Thanks for that. And thanks also for that, clarifying that statistic. So I'm going to ask Jamie first, but I'd like to hear from Naveen, Alex as well on this one. Now, Jamie, what are the hallmarks of a successful company culture?
So for me, there's 2 angles to answer that question, because one answer that I really believe strongly is like, and I'm going to sound like a consultant on this. Sorry, it depends. Right? Your culture should be designed very specifically around what drives your success as an organization. So for one culture, a rigid hierarchy could lead to a really successful organization. And another one, it could stifle it. It depends on the work you do. It depends on the industry you're in, the context. You know, like people talk about, you know, oh, we need to have a culture of innovation. Everyone wants innovation these days. I love innovation. But you know who I don't want to be innovative is like a nuclear power plant. Like, I don't want them experimenting and like hacking things. You know what I mean? So there is a core answer that says you got to find the one that's right for you, and that's going to look different than other people. That being said, we've got some data from our research that's pointing to a pretty strong correlation with things like innovation and transparency and agility and inclusion, that the sort of more futurist you are on those concepts, that is correlating with much higher engagement. So I do think we're in a trend right now where we're leaving traditional management behind to some extent and moving towards future of work at like a high level. But when it comes to your individual culture, there's going to be room for nuances and uniqueness. That makes sense?
Yes, that's very helpful. Naveen, you're the CEO of a company and you have a distinct culture. Can you tell us, you know, what are the hallmarks of a successful culture, certainly with respect to Riva, but maybe more generally too?
I think it's building a company that is about the employees. You know, I think a lot of people are focused on your customers. I think we focus first on our employees. And, you know, obviously the cliche out there, happy employees, happy customers. But, you know, looking at the different parts of an employee journey at Riva, from the moment that they're recruited to going through that onboarding process, to their first 30, 60, 90 days, to what happens after that, those are all different phases. And you have to kind of see how you're working and with that employee on different facets, not just, hey, did you meet your goals? And, you know, are you doing what's expected? But also thinking broader than that, you know, what are ways they can get involved? How can they think about professional development? How are they starting to collaborate? and get to know other people on the team. So you have to almost hit it from many different angles, and it has to be repetitive. And it also can't be so, prescribed. Some of it is, just inherently organic, just like for us having Slack as a key tool, and our most popular channel is fur babies. Who would have drawn that up in a strategy session, right? But that's what the metrics say.
And Alex, do you have any observations as well as to what makes a successful culture, company culture?
Yes, and I think you're going to hear me, John, talk about a learning environment or a learning lab. So providing opportunities to the employee beyond obviously their pay and beyond their day-to-day experiences, so that you create a sense of belonging in the company, a sense of community, and they feel part of a group that's doing something important. So that clarity of mission and purpose every day. And then some almost ritual elements to it of, making sure that there are regular touch points, both on a one-on-one basis, if you're a manager with, your direct reports, or if you're an exec, checking in with the entire organization and giving them at least those high-level messages about direction and what you're observing as a leader.
Naveen, I noticed certainly on your website, and then just in media, about Riva Solutions, and just for the audience's sake, some of the accolades here, recognized as a fast-growing high-tech leader by NVTC, that's Northern Virginia Technology Council, Deloitte's Technology Fast 500, and inclusion in the Washington Fast 50, plus the Fed 100 recognition of leadership there. I know you're going to say, I asked the question is, what do you attribute this? And it's cool, but I'm wondering, is it just the engagement with the employees? What else is it, or what is it you're unleashing with the employees to achieve these things?
An easy answer is to say having an alpaca as our mascot helps a lot. So that's kind of our spirit animal. But I think that really I think we provide a home to employees where we think about their pedigree, their experience, and their background to come in, and they obviously have to tackle a bit of learning curve to learn about us, but we don't want to stifle their ideas. We want to allow them to be able to be critical thinkers, contribute their own thoughts to how they can see something go to fruition. And I think that nature of encouraging that, right? I think that allows people to kind of be their more authentic, real, genuine self at work, which, a lot of us are like, here's I am at personal life, here's my work life. And I think we try to bring out that genuine quality if we can with an individual. And as a nature of doing that, I think they feel very comfortable at Riva because, they're able to really think freely and not have to be as guarded all the time in different situations. So we try to really harness that and encourage that kind of trait and those behaviors.
You have to tell us about the alpaca mascot. Why is an alpaca your mascot?
We're a 12-year-old company, and I should probably throw out some of those statistics. We're about 575 employees in about 24 states, serving 16 federal agencies. But which is difficult, right? Everybody, you got different generations and different geographical locations and all sorts of challenges that come with that. But, I am an avid traveler, and, an alpaca is symbolic of curiosity, somebody who's curious, always looking to learn, and a protector. And I feel like those were some of the attributes. It is very common for people who come to our headquarters to take selfies with the alpaca as they enter, and that is something that seems to be resonating wherever we go. He was seen at our last holiday party as well. I think more people wanted to take a picture with the alpaca than anybody on our leadership team, candidly. So, but we're okay with it. I think his picture is going to go up on the website soon. So, it's a great person to have on your leadership team.
And just to clarify, are we referring to a live alpaca in your office?
No, it's actually a large stuffed alpaca. His name is Alpaca Shakur, and he really does have a big following here at Riva. So, yeah,
that's great, Alex.
I will add though,
yes.
some people, will say, oh, that's maybe cheesy or corny, but like the purpose of things like that is to have some sort of artifact or ritual that communicates what the culture is about, right? And it's just an added dimension. There was an organization that we did a case study of for one of our books, where they do paired programming as software engineers, and so they're always doing things together. So in their staff meetings, 2 people report at the same time, and so they each hold one helmet of a Viking, one horn of a Viking helmet. And it's like, okay, does it have to be a Viking helmet? No, but the symbolism drives home the meaning, I think, more effectively. And so I get that it's like it's nice and we laugh in the selfies and that's all cool, but there is a serious element to it as well.
Alex, apparently there are alpaca running all over Virginia, which is perhaps why in June of this year, CNBC recognized Virginia as the #1 state in which to do business. So I provocatively ask you, Alex, what is Virginia doing differently and better apparently than other states? And I realize we're about to start a catfight here, but just Virginia, other than the alpaca point, tell us about why CNBC rates Virginia as the #1 state in which to do business.
Yes, thank you, John. So I've worked in Virginia local government now going on 15 years. And so in some ways we are stewards of a legacy in Virginia. Virginia is a state that's been able to act collaboratively when it comes to initiatives that benefit one region, also benefiting another. The General Assembly has, surprisingly collaborated and been able to see the forest for the trees on projects like, the most recent one, Amazon HQ2, where there was not only innovation campuses coming to Northern Virginia, but a tech talent pipeline for the entire state, investments made in technology, skills and programs in each region. So Virginia has a long tradition of looking out for all corners and in communicating with one another about what the needs are and understanding that we complement one another in terms of what we deliver to the state. So I think that we're stewards of this legacy, and we're fortunate to have the resources and people really that we do. And I think that that's done by making some of these forward-leaning decisions. I mentioned that there's some of the legacy areas like education and transportation, and now looking out even further into training, higher ed, and ensuring equity of opportunity for all of our residents.
The Virginia, like every other state, and most of the world, sadly, went through this pandemic, right? And still going through this our pandemic, COVID pandemic. Jamie, I'm going to ask you this question. Certainly the pandemic highlighted the need to successfully manage these remote workforces, hybrid work, distributed workforce, whatever the phrase might be. What are some key lessons for managers to better manage in this new environment?
Yeah, there's a couple that jump to mind for me. One, and my original background is in the field of conflict resolution, so maybe this is my sort of bias, but I'm just hearing a lot more conflict with the separation, and actually, honestly, more reliance on email as communication, which is horrible for causing conflict actually as a communication method. People are kind of, and maybe it's just the stress of the whole environment, but people are on edge. And so the ability to realize that you have a conflict and have that conversation quickly over Zoom or any kind of video call, but not by email, is super important. And I think people need to up their game in having those tough conversations without the drama. But the second piece is around transparency. When we were all in the office, we learned a lot about what was happening through what we call passive transparency. Like you'd watch the marketing team run down the hallway and go into the conference room and they all looked worried, and you're not part of that and you don't know what they talked about, but now that's in the back of your head. You know what I mean? You observe all these things that then go into your decision making, like maybe I should give marketing some space while they deal with whatever crisis it is. Now that's all invisible. And so you actually have to look at ways to use technology to sort of replace that passive transparency. Like things like Slack are really great for that, because you can just post a lot of things asynchronously and you can scan it and kind of get a sense of what's going on. But it doesn't have to be that one technology, but we have to add systems now that replace that passive transparency that we were missing. Beyond that, I think people actually have generally been more productive in the remote setup in most organizations, and that's cool. But it's just, there are some things that we took for granted in the office that we just have to recreate.
Naveen, you mentioned your company is active. Is it 22 states you have offices?
Yeah.
Is it 20? So that sounds like a distributed workforce to me. Was it in the DNA of Riva from the beginning, or were the lessons learned along the way?
In terms
The
of
ability to manage this distributed workforce.
I mean, we definitely have been managing across multiple states for quite some time. I think that, you know, we are a bit forward thinking to embrace technology in corporate and throughout. So, you know, switching to video and switching to Slack was not that significant of a change. I think it really is what Jamie was talking about. That's a new term, passive transparency, but it's so good. You know, for things like team building, ideation, collaboration, strategy, you really have to find a way, you know, to allow people to meet in person somehow, and you know, and we have to do it across regions. And you know, we went virtual, like we declared that we were going to go full virtual quite some time ago, but we launched a program called Riva Flex, which really was the concept to work from anywhere. So we do have an office, you know, if you want to come in, if you want to work from on the road, if you know, if you want to go, some people move to other regions, right? And that was okay. And we embraced that. But does that mean that we still won't have a potluck? We won't have a strategy session? Does that mean that we won't, you know, look to incorporate different events, you know, that we can get people together as groups? We still do those things, and it's fantastic. And I like that. I like that you tied it to conflict resolution, because that's like more than half the battle, is getting people to just get in person and chat off a prescribed meeting on a video with an agenda, and just have you know, just have a sidebar. And the more of those you can get between, you know, different teams, different groups, the more you see their teams gelling and being able to work together collaboratively. So if anything, I probably you know, create too many events at Riva. I would have been accused. I think somebody the other day called me out, and you know that our Glassdoor review, we had something called mandatory fun, but you know, these are all optional. And honestly, it's an environment to encourage the ability for you to kind of have those sidebar conversations if you choose to take it. It really helps you know, create that chemistry and bonds within the team.
I'm curious about, you know, the culture. I think I'll open this up to all three of you, but maybe Jamie, you jump in there, given your consulting work. But from a management style perspective, when we had the pandemic hit, you know, there are managers who are very, you know, not micro, but they might be micromanagers. They're very control oriented. It's, you know, eyes on, and they want the evidence of the work being produced. How did they transition? Have they transitioned? And what's the future of that style of management?
Well, I mean, I think that with the pandemic, we took a bunch of rules that we knew to be true and just threw them out the window, right? I mean, like for decades, we said, oh, and I mean, again, Naveen's is an exception, having gone all remote before this. For decades, particularly larger organizations, they're like, it's literally impossible, is what management would say. Like literally, we will fail if we all work remotely. I can't let you do it. You know, if you're at this level, you can apply to work from home 1 day a week. And then suddenly we did it all. And I think the supervision piece is also completely being reinvented now. It used to be, if I can't see you, you're not working. And we accepted that. Even, I mean, you know, even though people maybe wouldn't admit it, we accepted that as the rule. Like, I got to make sure if you're not here, then you're eating bonbons on the couch. You know what I mean? And that's different. And I think the idea of I have to control how you do your work is definitely going to go by the wayside, and that what we need in its place is better metrics. Like, well, how do we actually measure like productivity and work in the office? Like, you know, I mean, again, I'm guessing Naveen has better systems than most on this, but I feel like we don't have good systems on it. How do you know that not how do you know that I actually did work, but like, what is the work and how are we measuring that? Because it's not in hours anymore. You know what I mean? And so, but it's a little bit Wild West. Like, I don't think we have a model for this. And I think the people that put some good thinking into designing better metrics and systems for tracking accountability and supervision are going to be ahead of the game in terms of attracting top talent.
So it makes you wonder about what the KPIs of tomorrow, right? The key performance indicators are. It's the easy ones are all the financial stuff, right? And Naveen, do you have just a quick idea to respond to Jamie on that? Do you have these sort of non-traditional KPIs? Do you measure differently than perhaps your peers?
I think it's about, you know, I used the phrase a lot early in the pandemic, pivot and adapt. And I think that this isn't a matter of, can we solve this challenge? This is the new reality. And so we have to embrace it. And I think that how are you going to deal with culture and performance was our two biggest risk factors. And we said, you know what, maybe those will drop off. But hey, at least we're going to get started early to try to figure it out, and we'll tackle it after a while. And that was kind of the risk that we took. And I think one of the biggest things that I found is also utilizing how you interview and identify candidates. I think you shift that mindset, right? Because now you're looking at, there is no micromanagement, there is accountability. It's a performance-based culture. And so you start to look for those attributes while you're recruiting and interviewing. And therefore, then it's kind of like, well, here's your job. Here's the goals. Good luck. I'll see you later. And, we create checkpoints along the way. But I think that is the culture we've tried to promote. And, and honestly, I think it's ebbs and flows. I think, it's about life. Sometimes people have things that come up and people don't. We just came up with a new program that we're launching next year. It will be a paid day off in addition to the federal holidays. It will be for a mental health day. And an employee in 2022 can just use it whenever they want. Hey, I woke up not feeling great. I'm going to take my mental health day. And, I think that's kind of like us trying to say, hey, this is what we're getting and we need to adapt and create a program around it.
Alex, I think about Northern Virginia, it's home to so many high-tech companies. You've got data centers, Naveen's company, many others. I'm wondering, is this phenomenon of building a new type of culture? Is it more likely the case with high-tech companies, but how about more traditional companies? Retail, storefront companies. Or is it easier because it's high tech and they're technologists and they're used to managing each other remotely or communicating?
Yeah, well, when I think about Northern Virginia, I think about how many jobs and what percentage of the jobs can be done remotely and heading into this new environment that is dawning upon us and the new rubrics I think that will need to be developed by organizations and leaders about how to navigate and continue to bring about this feeling of belonging in the learning environment that I mentioned. It's over 55% of the jobs in this region can be done remotely, which is extraordinarily high by national standards. Like you said, there are many other types of jobs, whether you're assembling tractor equipment or working retail or working in a dental office that have to be done in person. So we have an extraordinarily higher proportion of workers who are going to be straddling, the office and home, or going into what everyone's known as hybrid. And so I think the next challenge, and certainly not one that can't be overcome, but is to strike that balance and think critically about how to create the community that captures both the person who's at home and the person who's in the office. And whether even if the two paths don't cross, right? You may have people in the same organization that have different functions, and so somebody on one team may not be in the office, and you could have others who are commonly there. So I think the key is, just making sure that each of those employees feels equally engaged and part of what you're doing. And I think that that's more acute in this region, or that issue is more top of mind here based on, as I mentioned, the composition of the workforce. And that's also why our traffic is down 65%, John, from before the pandemic. So we can enjoy that while it lasts.
Yeah, I get on 66 just to enjoy the drive. Now I'm going there. It's a lot of fun. Any other reflections on that? Naveen, I just picked on high tech companies there. Jamie, so Alex's observation is, given the demographics, the corporate demographics of the area, right? That's the case for on average here. But if you're a manufacturing company, is this new approach to culture change more difficult?
I mean, I don't think it's inherently more difficult. I mean, it goes back to my original point about your culture should reflect what really drives your success. And so there are certain organizations that require in-person sort of activity. And so you have to build a culture that supports that. I still think many, not all, but many of the organizations where you have that physical plant that people have to go into, they still have a bunch of management work that still gets done in the office that doesn't need to be. And so I think they face the same challenge that a sort of knowledge working office faces, which is, why do we actually do things together in person? What is it that needs to be done in person versus not in person? And people will throw things like, oh, well, collaboration. No, you can collaborate like this, but there's some types of collaboration that don't work well in this virtual and two-dimensional environment. So what are they? And it's again, this is the sort of Wild West. We're having to define these things. So whether you have a factory floor or not, you're still saying, wait a minute, who needs to be in person to do what kind of work? Because you will have discovered, if you talk to your people, that they are getting tremendous value out of not going to the office. They are getting closer to their family. They are being 100% more efficient and effective. They are changing their views on their whole life. And you're like, that toothpaste is out of the tube now. So you can't just say, oh, well, we need you back because before we did all this work back in the office. And again, I think that extends to less, knowledge working environments, and there are plenty of examples of, agricultural or manufacturing organizations that have unbelievably good cultures that embrace some of the same things that Naveen is talking about in terms of designing around the needs of employees rather than management. You still have that opportunity. I mean, there might be some limitations, obviously, if you got an assembly line, but there's plenty of room to build really good cultures in those contexts.
Naveen, I'm curious about the role that the culture that you've had. I remember as we were prepping for this, you made the point, you've always had either this culture or we were always on the path to where you are now, from a corporate cultural perspective. But I'm curious, do you attribute any of the culture to the profitability of Riva and its competitiveness in your government space? Do you say this culture has driven X number of profit dollars? Or is it's not really on the radar?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I mean, I talk to the finance leaders of the organization. They don't really like me much because they're like, you're spending too much money on culture, right?
And alpacas.
And like I'll sit there and debate them on the financial reports going, but you're not tracking how many people are staying in the company because of our culture. Where is that in your numbers, right? Obviously you have some metrics around HR, but I think that inherently we do have a tendency by promoting a stronger culture, a focus on employees, that people want to work here, right? So we got a lot of people applying and a lot of people being hired in a competitive market in the DC area. And then specifically, and then we also got a lot of people who stay because they like the culture where, you know, as I say it, there's a cybersecurity professional and somebody comes and gives them $30,000 more, or 30% more, you know, I mean, they're like, well, what difference does it make? I'm always on a Teams meeting or a Zoom call in a black box anyway, sitting at home. Why don't I take that money? It's going to be usually your culture that's going to win that battle of why people stay. And so it's hard to track those, you know, intangibles, but I don't think you can kind of build a checklist and just say, you know, culture, check. I've accomplished this in my strategic plan. It's got to be something that permeates from leadership down into managers, and everybody has that mindset. And I think that once it's in the DNA of your firm, it just stays there. And usually the people, you know, that don't fit in, it roots itself out naturally anyway. So that's what we've tried to create and build that. But, you know, it is not, there's no perfect recipe. It is just, you know, in a weird way, going all the way roundabout, it kind of ties back to your core values. And, you know, if your core values for us, results, innovation, values, accountability is what RIVA stands for. So it's, you know, that's where we say this is more paramount than the bottom line. And everybody, I think, knows that in our company.
Would you repeat what RIVA stands for? It's an acronym, isn't it?
Yeah, results, innovation, values, and accountability.
Very interesting. Jamie, question for you on, you know, legacy cultures. So my question is, you know, which elements of legacy cultures do you jettison? And we talked about micromanagement behavior. We talked about centralized control, but are there other tangible examples of cultures, or I call them legacy cultures, that have to go? And before you answer that, I want to remind the audience we're taking questions. So feel free to put questions in at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, and just go ahead and we'll turn to those in just a bit. Sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah. I think the biggest one, which I was going to bring up even before Naveen made his points about focusing on employees, but I think the biggest shift the shift that's going to have the biggest impact when it comes to employee engagement is moving away from putting the organization first and start putting the employees first. Like it has been a given for a century that the organization is owned by owners, and they create the organization with a hierarchical, you know, organizational structure. And the higher you are on that structure, the more the organization's designed around you and your needs. And it's a big shift to say, no, we're going to design around employees' needs. But literally in our culture assessment, the strongest correlation between that and employee, to any of our questions, 64 questions, and employee engagement is the one question that says we design around the needs of employees. And so shifting towards what do employees needs rather than what does management needs, and solving for deeper problems. I mean, for deeper needs too, not just like dealing with the stuff on the surface, but going deep. I mean, even the sort of the mental health, like there was an organization, you know, Naveen gave an example, but there's an organization that we worked with in the early pandemic, like summer of 2020, that said, okay, we're giving everyone an extra day off this summer, sort of similar kind of thing. And it was just the summer, but it had a stipulation. You have to unplug. You can't be on email. If we see you on email, then you worked that day and that wasn't a day off. Like, and because people were like losing their stuff, right? It was getting really bad for a while. And they're like, we have to not be on Zoom for a day. And that kind of attention to health and well-being, I think is going to be, you're going to start to see that in the companies that attract the talent. They're like, hey, we care about you. We care about your health. We're going to be more flexible. We're going to let you design things. We're going to let you figure out what works best. Those kinds of approaches, as opposed to we're standardizing, everyone's treated the same way because we don't want to be unfair. I think that stuff is going to start to go by the wayside.
It's interesting. There's sort of this, it's almost like this power redistribution, right, between management and workers. And a friend of mine works at a pharmaceutical company in New Jersey, which I will not name. And they said, everybody's returning. This is about 6 months ago. Everybody comes back. September 1, you're all coming back to where it was. Crickets, absolute crickets. And then they changed it to, well, what I meant to say was, because it wasn't necessarily a revolt, but it also wasn't not a revolt. And I think that's a fascinating behavior that we're experiencing in this country right now. There's lots of research and data. You saw some of those points earlier there. Naveen, let me ask, what kind of advice would you give to other CEOs trying to redefine their culture, assuming that they didn't start this way? It's sort of new cultural approach. Do you have any words of wisdom there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great to sit down with your leadership team in person, if you can, with a whiteboard, and start to really jot down what are all the employee programs that you have right now, and just jot down that list. Don't throw it on that whiteboard, like ideation 101, and start to like really think through how many different programs do we have. And we did that, and then we started to say, okay, this is kind of a bucket around Riva Karma. This is a bucket around, the professional development track of where we're headed with this is Riva Academy. And then we started to kind of generally create programs. Some are one-off, some are consistent, that were permeating in the organization. And I think that really started to take teeth, kind of take hold after a while. But I think some of it is get paralysis by analysis of getting out of the gate and going, you know what, I'm not going to do it perfectly, but I'm going to get started with it and break some eggs, right, to make that omelet. And then next thing you know, maybe it's 6 months later, maybe it's a year later, going, oh, remember that whiteboard? All of this stuff started to come true, but it definitely didn't come true in 30 days. And so, but just getting started out of the gate, I think is a key part of it.
Yeah, I'll add to that, because like that's what we tell our clients is build a playbook. And it's such a boring metaphor, I know, really, the playbook metaphor in business, never heard that before. But like for culture change, you're going to run a bunch of plays. You don't change your culture by deciding what the absolute perfect image of the perfect culture is, and then you implement it like as a thing. You are running plays, and some of them are quick and easy, like, hey, we're going to change the way we do our staff meetings because we are shifting our culture to be in this kind of direction. Or we're going to roll out a whole new internet, and it's going to take, a year, and it's going to be complicated. And that's a big change, but you're always going to have those infrastructure changes along with the quick wins. And you should always be updating your playbook and taking a look at your culture and saying which parts of our culture are causing the most friction now, because we need to run some plays over there. And it is continuously iterative. It's not, there's no real finish line on this. You're always nurturing and managing it.
Alex, earlier you alluded to traffic being down in the area, in the greater DC area. Although that should definitely be a KPI of distributed workforces, number of cars on the highway. And you talk about, you engage with a lot of senior executives in your role there at the Economic Development Authority in Fairfax. Are you hearing these sort of things? Is there hesitancy by execs to sort of let go of the control?
Not at all. I think that they've leaned into adapting, and they really want to understand what makes the employees tick. It's in their self-interest. Talent is scarce, and so this has really been an eye-opening opportunity to do further engagement, to tinker, like Jamie said, to run some different plays. And I think that there's been a lot of successes, that will endure from what organizations and executives have developed or learned during the past 18 months, 2 years. So in terms of a laboratory, hopefully the leaders and executives have taken advantage of this time to tap into what really makes people engaged and want to work hard and stay.
We talked about the sort of so DC obviously has multiple jurisdictions, right? Not only do you have the counties and the towns and the cities and stuff, but you've got 2 states in the District of Columbia. From your perspective, from an economic development view, is it more challenging to deal with a multi-jurisdictional area? And even from a workforce perspective, people moving around physically, or even trying to find better opportunities for themselves. Can you talk about that for a second? And then could you talk about this initiative, Connected DMV, as well, please?
Sure, and this is actually another culture question, and another culture that is evolving rapidly. I think, it's the Potomac River, not the Potomac Ocean. It's Washington D.C. and Maryland, not the other side of the river, and really, coming to the realization that we're all part of the DMV, and that all of our assets are stronger when presented together. But certainly present some unique challenges, especially in economic development, when sometimes the minders are in Richmond or in Annapolis or in City Hall, and breaking down those barriers happens through the same kinds of things we talked about today: relationship building, developing trust, finding commonalities between areas that we can commonly we can succeed together, like recruiting workforce, because John, as you said, this place probably more than other part of the country, you have people working across the jurisdictional boundaries. And I remember when Amazon came to Arlington, explaining that not everyone who worked for Amazon was even going to live in Arlington, because that's what some people assumed, coming. But we had an entire region of 6 million people to absorb those jobs over 15 years. And this region adds 50,000 jobs a year almost, regardless of whether Amazon is here. And so, that is a long way of saying that we've come together to gather all of our respective value propositions. We complement one another. It's really one economy, one ecosystem of assets, and identified which ones, how to put our best feet forward when it comes to attracting new industry here, and really developing and possibly entirely new industries, so that we're actually growing the pie of opportunity, both in terms of jobs and investment throughout the entire region. So Connected DMV, a couple of their initiatives are in quantum computing is one, and hydrogen power is another. And so those are areas that, based on our existing assets in the university and computer science and technology programs, federal science agencies and labs, and the collaborative planning and economic development we're doing, where we have a competitive advantage. But these industries are just starting out. These are what cyber was 20, 25, 30 years ago. So we feel like that's a winning value proposition for all of the leaders who are participating, is that we're going to do something that benefits everyone, because it doesn't even exist here today.
I think about, just to come back on the relationship, and we have a question or two. I'm going to turn to those in just a moment, because we're getting a little short on time. But I just want to touch back on this, this new relationship between workers and management. And Naveen talked about, just testing things, getting started and making mistakes. And yet I don't perceive senior executives as liking to admit that they made a mistake, right? It's just that's sort of not their ethos necessarily. So, Jamie, I'll ask you this first, but maybe Naveen and Alex too. I mean, isn't there a lot of internal soul searching by senior executives? Because how do you admit that you're just trying things out and that might fail?
I think it's getting easier for people right now, because like I said before, it's sort of an open, it's wide open. And nobody knows what we're doing. Like on the return to the office thing, I've seen so many organizations come up with, do really solid work. Okay, we've thought about it really hard. Here's what we're going to do. We want people to be safe, and so these people come in on Mondays and Wednesdays, and these people come on, and they have this whole plan, and everyone agrees to the plan. The employees say, no, we like that plan. And then we say, go, and then nobody does it. Or they do it for the first day and they're like, why are we doing this? Because you don't know until you try it. And so that is why the iterative thing has to be in there. And actually, I think for me, going back to the hallmark of a good culture, that sort of metric piece and the ability to say, here's where we think we're going to be when we do this. And then when we're not there, say, why was that? As opposed to, who didn't do this and why didn't we get, if you go to the blame thing, it doesn't work at all. There's plenty of organizations that have really embraced we are constantly going to miss our targets. And not constantly anyway, but when we miss our targets, we use it as a learning opportunity. I think the whole return to the office, come up with your plan. Great. It's not going to work. I guarantee you. but run it. Because if you keep waiting to come up with a perfect plan, that's not going to help either. Run the plan, adapt, and sort of go from there. And so it just becomes less about admitting you're wrong and more about learning why the model I had didn't play out the way I thought it was going to.
Naveen, so you're not afraid to admit you're wrong, Naveen, is that right?
No, definitely not. I mean, what Jamie's describing reminded me of, like, you know, when the pandemic started, we were talking about, you know, video etiquette and, you know, lighting and being on camera and body language. And we had someone come and talk to our teams about that. And then about 4 or 5 months later, I go, I don't know. I was talking to some people. I'm like, I don't know about you, but we kind of got some video fatigue going on, especially as everybody moved to 30-minute meetings and stacked them all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And so I kind of was like, you know what? I'm going to just start not being on video as often. And then I doubled down. And so sometimes I'm like, not on video going, oh, by the way, I'm on a Peloton right now, just telling you, FYI. And so I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more of me saying, look, there's no perfect formula. Sometimes you're going to be on video, you know, and a lot of this is based on situational awareness and emotional IQ, right? But so have a common sense around certain meetings. But it really is, once again, to say, I'm just going to put the power in your hands as an employee. And I think that's kind of the theme that keeps going on is I'm just going to put the power in the employee's hands around whatever situation and whatever anguish, whatever positivity, you know, whatever moods that they're in, you know, whatever's going on in their work life, is to say it's now in your control.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn to questions. And again, to the audience, we are taking questions. If you have a question, feel free to go ahead and at the bottom of your screen, you can populate their Q&A. Here's a question, and I'll read it aloud. So can you talk about how you have changed the way you recruit your talent? And if you have an internal talent team, how has the traditional interview cycle changed? So I'm going to throw that to Naveen first, but ask Alex and Jamie to jump in too.
Yeah, it's a really good question, especially with the fight for talent in the area. And I think, you know, one thing that's just blown us away with results is LinkedIn. I mean, it's just such a phenomenal, I think the other day, I was just surfing on LinkedIn and I see somebody post, you know, great job. We could not do this without you, and tied to a federal proposal manager role. So I said, interesting. So I forwarded that profile to our recruiter. I said, reach out. And we hired her like literally that next week. I mean, it's funny, right? But I mean, you're able to like see people interacting online and you're seeing who people recommend and you're seeing the stuff that they're putting out there. So I think it really helps you hone in on candidates without even the interview process a lot better. I think the other one that we do these like growth type happy hour social events. And if people are in the interview queue, we go, why don't you just invite them out that day and see if they'd like to come in and meet some people on the team. That's worked really well because outside of just the regular interview cycles, they get to kind of come in, see some of the culture, meet people in different departments, chat with people who work here. And so that's given us a high rate of being able to close out hiring people that are highly coveted beyond the recruiting process. And I think obviously the final part is it's really enabled us to look outside of the DC area too. You know, so we do have people now that are being hired that are, you know, able to work in Nebraska and in Florida and Texas, and it's opened up the job, you know, the job supply and demand issues. So that's been a very useful tool for us, and you know, something that, you know, we'll continue to kind of play tied to different roles, see what we could do in that hybrid approach.
Jamie, I remember there was a webinar in this series about 8-9 months ago where it was an organizational development expert like yourself, and he made the point: hire the right person first. Don't hire for the job description, just hire the right person, which is a bit of a cognitive dissonance issue, right? Because most people want to hire the job description, right? But so, Jamie, how do you hire the right person without respect to the job description?
Well, I mean, to me, it's the connection between job description and the culture. So again, one of the same organization that we studied for our second book, they're software engineers that do paired programming. It's literally two people writing code on one computer. And so their mantra is, if you're going to share a mouse with someone, you'd better be good at collaborating. Right. And they said, we can't teach, they said, I can teach you coding. I can't teach you kindergarten skills. And so their interview process starts with a group interview. They take the candidates all together, they pair them up, and they ask them to work together to solve a problem. So this person you're competing against for the job, you got to, and the assignment is make sure that your partner makes it through to the next round. Now, the people that are like, I have the perfect answer and I write it down and my resume looks really great and they submit it in and they don't collaborate, they don't get the job. You know, I mean, you gotta structure either the conversation or in this case, an exercise to get right at the stuff that you know is going to drive the success, because they know that that process works better for them. You don't have to use that process. That's just the one that works for them. And so, but if that's what it is, then that's how we hire. And they also then, the next round is they bring them in and they spend a day actually working with an employee and doing work. Like, why is it like we do 3 interviews and then I sign you a lifetime contract? Come work here. Why, like, give them a day, pay them, right? But give them a day. And then they also add then like a 3-month contract after that. And again, you don't have to use that system, but it's very specifically and intentionally designed to get the people who will be successful in that culture. Right? It's not like they're a good person. Everybody's a good person. It's that particular person's going to thrive in the culture that we've created. And I want to get that piece linked up. Yeah, you got to have the skills, et cetera, et cetera. But if I get someone who's not going to thrive, it doesn't matter how smart they are. And so you got to build that into the process, I think.
And lastly, because we're running out of time here, Jamie, somebody's asking a question. Apparently you tantalized the audience with your passive transparency. So can you wax poetic about that? What is it? And more ways to create passive transparency.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think of it like it's like who's doing what. So create what, like, honestly, the daily huddle, the daily stand-up meeting, which some people used to do in the office, you can now do that on Zoom. People should be meeting every day, just saying, what are you working on? If I had visibility into that, and that can be recorded. I used to, in a very small company, we used to have a Slack channel called TCB, Taking Care of Business. It's just what we were doing. And now I can just see it. I don't have to look at it all the time, but it's there to me. Most people have also figured out the calendar thing. Who's meeting with whom? Right? You got to know who's meeting with whom. You used to see that in the office. Now I got to see it in the calendar. So we got to have shared calendars and protocols for saying things the right way so that we see what's going on and blah, blah, blah. So most are figuring that out, but who's meeting with whom, who's doing what, and what results are being achieved. I want to see that. I want to see who's ahead of schedule on their work. And I like that. Just needs to be visible. The more and there are plenty of, technology solutions, or you can get that stuff up where you can go onto the site and say, oh, okay, these people are ahead, these people are behind. I think I'll go help these people. But it's about sort of getting the results more visible to the whole team.
I want to we're out of time, folks. Sorry about that. And if we didn't get to your question, sorry. Hopefully you gleaned a lot of value out of this discussion. I certainly have. This webinar will be posted on the Nova EDA website, that is novaeda.org, novaeda.org, and tomorrow. So please look forward to that. I want to thank this panel, thank the audience as well. It's been a great series and a wonderful session. Thanks, everybody. Take care.